Hello everyone, good evening, welcome to Season 2, Episode 6, or Episode 24 overall, of the Tommy Room. Today's episode is titled Jet Advice Part 2, and this is your host Martin. So welcome back. I've been on a hiatus. I know some of y'all have been wondering where have I disappeared off to, and I'll get to that in just a moment, but what I got on the menu for today's episode is just more jet advice. So I did a part 1 of this episode back in October, and that was after about a month of teaching. I had fairly general advice for jets, and I want to come back, revisit the topic, maybe give something a little bit more concrete, more specific. So here we are with Jet Advice Part 2. The Stoic quote for this week is still with Seneca. When a person spends all his time in foreign travel, he ends by having many acquaintances, but no friends. So I sort of disagree with this one, at least when I'm in a good mood, or just like in a normal mood. Like, nah, this is not true. Sometimes when I feel a little down, then I start thinking like, maybe Seneca was kind of cooking here. Obviously, Mr. Seneca didn't live in the era of, social media and being able to, connect to your relatives, acquaintances, even if you're living far away. But yeah, what do you think? Is he spot on with this take or no? Now, personal update. So let me just give you all a quick rundown on where I've been for this past month. So basically, I skipped. My last episode was about 4 weeks ago, so I just ended up skipping one episode. I apologize. I've been away for a while, but I hope it means that you've had some time to catch up on some of the episodes. In any case, so 2 weeks ago, I went to Kagoshima over the weekend to vacation there. My good friend Liam came and visited, and we had a blast in Kagoshima. Really genuine people in Kagoshima. Great time with Liam. What a really good vacation. I really enjoyed it. So the week prior, I knew the vacation was coming up, obviously, and I had wanted to kind of get the script done and the podcast recorded the week before. But the week before, I actually ended up catching, or I got food poisoning or some sort of flu virus or whatever, but I was throwing up. I had like probably the worst week in a while, just couldn't do anything. Also, I couldn't work out. That was the most frustrating part of it too. I'd been on kind of a good streak with that, but yeah, I just felt horrible for that entire week. Like basically Saturday to Friday, but Thursday, Friday, I was feeling decent, but that week was definitely challenging. So there's first week I got ill, then I was on vacation. When I came back, I think I didn't rest enough because I ended up getting sort of sick again, or just getting a sore throat. If you know me personally, I'm kind of prone to getting these sore throat type illnesses. My throat will be scratchy or whatever for a couple days, whatnot. Might have to use some tissues here and there, blow my nose, and then it goes away. But I caught a case of that last week because I was like, okay, well, 1 week delay and we can get it out. But then my voice was gone over the weekend, and when I tried to record beginning of the week, my microphone ended up kind of crapping the bed, so to speak. So I had like a good, solid, like, I think I recorded intro and like the main segment and like at least twice or something, like about 30 minutes worth of content 2 times. And then I re-listened to it, and the whole thing was just messed up. Like, it was like cutting out, repeating things. So it wouldn't have made for a good listening experience. That sounds like a lot of excuses, but I'm back now. And here to stay. Still alive. With that being said, not personal update, but no current event for this week. I have a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of jet advice, so let's get right into it. All right, jet advice part two. What advice do I have for jets this time? Like I said, the first month I gave sort of general advice. I want to try to be a little bit more specific in this episode. I would have to say, I'm going to start off. I feel like this one's a little vague, but my biggest piece of advice, if you're on jet, would be to get involved. So get involved in the community. And what do I mean by this is don't just go to work or school events, but try to find some other ones to really try to kind of immerse yourself in the community that you're teaching it in. And like I said, this would have to be my biggest piece of advice to any incoming or current jets. I do want to note that this is a lot easier for someone who's in my predicament or in a rural area. I've heard that it can be quite a bit more difficult for city jets, for example, to get the connections one needs to kind of integrate. Overall, though, I think being involved, outside of work is the best way to maximize your jet experience. So, especially for me, some days like don't particularly vibe with some of my colleagues, or just the teaching might go long. It could be a very long day, but if you're able to find some events outside of your work, in the local community, and that you can be a part of and that you can enjoy, I think that's it's really important. And it makes it so that instead of just doing the jet as kind of like, I'm doing it as like a job or whatever, it really makes it very enjoyable. You get to learn a lot about Japanese people and the culture. So personally, so this is kind of like, what have I done to get involved? So I love sports. I love sports, especially judo, and I have leveraged this passion to join clubs, teams, etc. So I go to a judo club on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and also attend middle school practices on occasion. In addition to that, I also practice volleyball with some teachers from one of my schools. I play soccer with random shakaijin, or adults, and sometimes with another group of teachers. And I also attend an exercise class taught by a wrestling champion. He's quite old now, but great guy. And you might be asking, like, okay, like, how do you get started? Like, how do you find these events? Like, are they on posters or something? My recommendation is to be open and be very forward in sharing your interests with your supervisor, with the teachers around you as much as possible. Asking about someone's hobby in Japan or what they do with their free time can be a little bit of a taboo question, of like, it's a more personal question than what you might expect. If I'm in the U.S., someone asks, "Hey, what are you doing on Saturday, or just on Saturdays? What are you doing as a hobby?" It's nothing. I'll just answer like, "Oh, then this is what I'm doing. I'll go hit the gym," or something like that. But here in Japan, asking, what are you doing in your free time? People are a little bit more hesitant to answer that question. So since that's the case, being upfront and so, because they might not ask you, and sharing what you do and what you like, and just when you arrive, this is what I like art, I like to paint, or I like sports. If you like art, for example, they have, I think most schools, especially once you're at the middle school level, should have like a shodo club, a calligraphy club. So again, there's ample opportunities for any kind of interests or hobbies you might have. You just have to kind of share them. And when you share them, if the people, your teachers hears that, oh, you have something in common with them, or an acquaintance that they know, they're going to connect you. And so, for example, the way that I got involved with my judo club is, I mentioned to my supervisor. My supervisor saw my kind of resume that I did judo, and he was like, "Oh, well, one of the people that works in the city hall, who I kind of know, they're one of the coaches. So let me connect you with them." And that's how I kind of got started. One caveat I do have about this whole thing is, I do want to note that I got a little bit lucky with, I mentioned volleyball, soccer, and the exercise class. So I kind of stumbled into these. So I think having a little bit of luck in terms of just overhearing a conversation, or just randomly getting invited to something, that's you're also gonna have those those situations as well, where you're not the one that's necessarily creating the situation. It just kind of arises in front of you. That being said, I still had to kind of take the initiative and show up to those things and try out and see what was up. But for example, with the exercise class, once someone of the teachers had mentioned it one time, and then they were saying, oh, you should come, and I hadn't really gone, and I knew it was around, and then I finally had the time and I showed up, and it was great, and I've gone quite a few times since then. However, so I did say that, a little bit lucky with the volleyball, soccer, and exercise class, but with judo, like I said in that example, I actively kind of sought it out. When I got to my supervisor, I was like, hey, like, do you know judo? Is there a high school club, middle school club? Is there a normal club? And I was lucky because my supervisor was able to connect me. He knew someone who worked in the city hall. But yeah, I kind of went after it and got involved. And it's been great. Like, I've had the opportunity to compete for my city, represent my city on the island tournament, and I think that just a memory that I'm going to remember for a long time. My second, moving on to my second kind of piece of jet advice, and this is actually something that you can do even when you haven't kind of arrived to your position. Like, let's say you're listening to this episode, you're going on jet, or you want to go on jet, but you're not physically in Japan yet, and that is to prepare games. What kind of games one ought to have prepared ranges very widely depending on what schools and how many you have, but I think having games is also especially important for the elementary school level. Looking at kind of my job and my situation, having a game or two that I can whip out and use it with the corresponding unit is a lifesaver. There have been a couple times when the teacher's like, okay, so Martin, we're gonna you have a game prepared for us today, right? And I'm like, what? And so I get called up by the teacher to lead a game or activity, and first I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, like, I mean, I definitely know some games off the dome, but I didn't expect it. And so a couple times I was a little rattled, but then I kind of I found my routine, and I also kind of mentally prepared those games of like, okay, well, the first time I was kind of surprised, and like I just kind of did a random game that with the materials that I had available. But let's say this happens again. Let's focus. Like, do I want to do that game again? Am I going to do a different game? But yeah, after that, first couple of times I always had a game up my sleeve. I think, and I think that has proven to be incredibly useful. Now, I don't want to go over some of these games in too much detail because it's not what the episode is about, but there's two games that I really enjoy using, and I think they're kind of easy to replicate as well for other jets. The two being Karuta game and the keyword game. So Karuta is it's also a Japanese game. It's very similar that they play with cards, but for the Karuta game, you're going to be playing it in pairs, or you can do more people, but basically you lay out a number of vocabulary cards in English vocabulary cards in front of the children. However many people are playing, they stand around the desk or wherever the cards are laid out, put their hands on top of their heads, and when you say a vocabulary word, the first one to kind of tap or slap the vocabulary card corresponding to the word you just said gets to keep it, or gets a point, or however you want to keep track of things. And once you've kind of exhausted all the cards on the table, or there's no cards left, you see who has the most points at the end, and then there's kind of a winner. And I really enjoy this game. I think it's a lot of fun, not only for the kids but also for you. You can also trick the students a little bit. The students love that. So instead of like if you're calling out the vocabulary words and you're doing like food or whatnot, but but you say, dog or cat with a lot of emphasis, and one of the kids like accidentally slaps the table, or they get startled because they're expecting the another vocab word. That's kind of a good bit of banter that you get to have. Now, the negative about the karuta game is there is a winner, so I would caution and just make sure that you find the appropriate pairs or rotate pairs so that everyone kind of has a chance at winning and doesn't feel like they're kind of being left behind. And obviously doing that is easier in smaller classrooms than in bigger ones, but always kind of keep an eye out, and maybe the teacher you're working with can help you with that. If they see one of the students really struggling, then potentially even the teacher can step in and kind of lose on purpose or not try very hard, so that the kid who's having a little bit of trouble is they're still learning, and they're still engaged, and they're still having fun. Now, onto the keyword game. Sort of a similar setup. This one you do play, I would recommend, in pairs. The karuta game game you can play with however many people you want surrounding the table. Usually I still do 2, but there has been an occasion where I did 3 or 4. But so the keyword game, you have 2 people. They're gonna sit next to each other. You're gonna place an eraser, keshigomu eraser, between them. They'll always have an eraser. It can be another object as well, but I usually just go with an eraser. And what you're going to do is usually I have all the vocab words that we just reviewed kind of pasted up on the wall or the blackboard in front of everyone, and I ask someone to randomly choose a keyword. That's going to be our keyword. And so the way the game goes is, the teacher or you claps twice. You go clap, clap, and you'll say a vocab word. The students kind of repeat that, and they'll go clap, clap, and they'll say the same word that you just said. So I'll just give a little demonstration. Say we're doing fruits as the topic. Clap, clap, strawberry, and the students will go clap, clap, strawberry. But if the vocab word you just said is the keyword that has been selected, then the first person to kind of snatch and pick up the eraser or whatever item you're using is kind of the winner. And this is a great game because you have to pay attention. If you slack off and I say the keyword, well, the other kid's is gonna snag the eraser right in front of your eyes. So you got to pay attention, got to be engaged, and then there's a lot of repetition involved, which I think is very important, and it's good. And one cool thing that you can do is once the round is over, have one of just randomly select one of the winners. Try pick a new person every time, but have one of the winners pick a new keyword, so then it keeps the game kind of interesting. So the good parts of this game is, again, it's really fun both for you and for the kids, and you can again trick students. For example, by saying something very fast. If the keyword is grapefruit, but you say apple, in a very fast tone with a lot of emphasis, someone can accidentally take the eraser, and then you have to be like, oh, no, I said apple, not grapefruit. And like I mentioned, the repetition in this one is really good. You could end up going through all the list of fruits before you say the keyword, and it gives the students a lot of practice just saying those words that are on the screen or on the board. The negative about this game is, again, you got the winner problem, and I have had to sometimes I'd have the teacher step in, or the teacher would step in themselves, or rotate pairs just to make sure that everyone has a fair shot at winning. Now, just to kind of conclude talking about the games, I think having a game that you can just it doesn't require much setup like these ones, that you can just do is essential. Now, the karuta game, you do have the vocab cards. Most of the time for elementary school, for example, they're going to have little vocab cards in the back of their textbook that they can cut out, and most of the time they will already have been cut out. So that's already kind of it's a silver platter for you to use that game. The games I just mentioned are kind of elementary school level, But even if I'm at the middle school, I try to have like a game or a warm up activity for middle school or high school kids as well. Games are fun both for teachers and students, facilitate learning, and as an added bonus, if you do games, the kids will love you, which it's great, and it's a good way to connect with the youngins. I think number 3, moving on to the next piece of jet advice I have, probably one of the more controversial ones. Kind of thought about how best to phrase this, but I think my advice would be to avoid the city hall. And maybe this is just predicated on the fact that I have had a bad experience, or have had some bad experiences, not so positive experiences, when I'm at my city hall. But this is just kind of my take on it. And this is mostly for municipal jets, or jets who work in the city halls for cities, but can apply to prefectural ALTs as well, those who work for, the prefecture. And I know other people potentially have had good experiences with city halls, but, in my experience, I'll just say I feel a lot, happier and just better kind of the less time I spend there. And the problem, I think, and the reason for this, it boils down to the atmosphere. When you're in the city hall, you're or everyone in the city hall, holds a public position, and public positions in Japan are super scrutinized, and everyone abides by, the super strict workplace standards. And, there can even be a little historical basis to this, is that, public positions, public servants used to literally carry the word of the emperor, or the shogun, or whatever. And so I think I've heard one of my friends kind of relate it to that, of hey, it wasn't, in America, public servants, okay, it's, the president, or whoever the president happens to be at that time, the government. But here there's kind of a special meaning. In Japan, there's kind of a special meaning attached to public positions. In addition to this, at least for my city hall, which is down south and it's quite rural, these places are slower to change and adapt to more modern workplace environments. And for example, lots and lots of overtime. People can be, exhausted beyond belief, doing overtime 6 days a week. One of my coworkers this week actually said that on Thursday or something, they stayed at the office a little bit past, or almost around 11 p.m., which is insane. And if you're hanging out with people who are dead tired, and it's all about that work, and maybe not even enjoying it, that's just it's not a fun environment, right? Recently I had a work dinner with one of with my group at the city hall, the team that I'm on, and there's talk of one of them quitting because and I feel for this guy, because he just seems exhausted all the time. There's some people who are cut out to handle the brutal amount of overtime that goes on over there, but some people, it takes a toll on you, I think, whoever you are. But I think for this guy, he just he's going through it, and I feel for him. In addition to that, I have had some issues with some people at the city hall. I will mention, that's not everyone, and I do have some, good friends there as well. The problem is, being at the city hall is it's a lot stricter of an environment. It's a lot more rigid of a workplace environment than when you're at the school that you're teaching at. Maybe this is actually good prep for me if I want to go into big law, being in a strict work environment, but it doesn't feel comfortable. And I think when I say avoid the city hall, it doesn't mean run out, but it's just because there's an alternative, right? The alternative is being at your school, or going to the school that you will be teaching at for that day. And when you're at the school, people are more relaxed and friendly. That's where I was invited to the yoga class, for example, and volleyball as well. The teachers can be super nice. For example, one teacher drove me from the port to the train station when I was meeting with my friend Liam a couple weeks ago, and even offered their car. She was like, "Hey, my daughter has an extra car. Do you wanna? I know you're touring your friend around the city. Do you want to go and take it?" And I refused. I don't want that responsibility. But just that's a very generous offer, and I don't. This isn't someone that I'm like hanging out with or working with every day because I rotate around the schools. But that just goes to show that I generally feel more appreciated at schools, and I think that you can kind of generalize this to other ALTs as well. When you're at the schools, the teachers, they see what you do and how you teach and how you operate, and they'll be like, oh, this, they're putting in the work. Versus at the city hall, they just kind of see you at your desk and are not entirely sure of what you do. I've had people who I sit, or they're in the same department, but they have very little understanding of what my actual job is. They'll be surprised to find out that I'm rotating between all the elementary schools and the middle school. They'll be like, really? And I'm like, yeah, dude, like you're like one desk over from me. Like, how is that? I mean, I guess, it doesn't have to be super, it doesn't have to know all about my position, but I just found that kind of surprising. My last piece of advice for Jets, and again, this is one that if you're here, you can follow, and if you're about to come, this is something that I would get on as well. Number 4 is learn the language. I seriously cannot stress this enough, but along with becoming involved, I think these two are kind of connected together. Knowing the language greatly enhances your time on Jet, especially for regions where there's not much English, like Kagoshima. And for Jets who are already here in Japan, dude, this is your time to learn. You're in a native environment. If you're ever serious about learning Japanese, I would really recommend just put the time into it. After work, maybe a little bit more, or if you have some downtime during work, get those reps with the kanji in. I know it can be hard, and kanji can be, it's really challenging, and it has been really challenging for me. But I think, this is something that I really recommend doing. There's 2 reasons that I just want to discuss real quick as to why you should learn. First of it being that you can communicate better with teachers and coworkers. Lesson plans are a lot more easier to set. You might think, well, I'm going to be teaching English, so the English teacher will surely speak English and we'll be fine. Yeah, but if you're teaching in the elementary schools, for example, there's no set quote-unquote English teacher. These are teachers who are teaching all subjects, like even in elementary schools in the US, but they might not necessarily know English too well, and I've had that be the case quite a few times. And so if we're trying to communicate about expectations, usually I'm talking to them in Japanese, and that's made it a lot easier for me to understand what they want from me and what I should be doing in the class. Versus if I spoke no Japanese, it would be a lot harder. Like I think communicating would be quite difficult. I also think that this comes both in terms of how you handle situations at the city hall or with like your bosses, and then with teachers. But if you know Japanese, there's a little bit less fear about communication mishaps. Maybe you can understand better what they're trying to say, and not get into a sticky situation. Number 2, for learning the language is that you're able to better connect and understand Japan and Japanese culture. I feel like some ALTs are not very well versed in Japanese, and that's okay. There's no fault in that, but people will be willing to engage with you a ton more if you speak the language. You might get invited to events, sometimes even just because, someone's like, hey, look at my foreigner friend who can speak Japanese. And this kind of, like I said, this leads back to the getting involved point I made earlier. If you learn the language, I think it's a lot easier to get involved. It's a lot easier to find the events that you're looking for. Another thing is that you can understand a lot more. a lot more about, like I said, Japanese culture, the language, and just people in general. I get a lot deeper insight. And for me, it's not about just when I'm faced with something I don't quite understand. Knowing the why is really important, and being able to. And if you learn Japanese, Japanese will give you the tools to ask. Well, why is this the case? Or maybe it will give you, you'll be able to understand it naturally just because of the language. Anyway, I think, learning the language again, it's just do it. I know it's not a required thing. I really recommend it. I did want to share some tools and resources that I have been using to learn Japanese. I'm not going to go into very much detail into these, but here are some resources that I've been using that I think you can use as well. None of these are sponsored. Duolingo, please sponsor me though. I think I've gotten like over 3 people to download the app, but yeah, my biggest or not biggest, I think this is no particular order, but my one thing that I use on the daily is Duolingo. I spend about 25 minutes a day on Duolingo. Recently, actually, I've gotten up to a over 2-year streak on Duolingo. So how about that? So it's kind of cool to think about. I've been learning Japanese slowly but surely for about 2 years now. I do want to mention that with Duolingo, the usefulness slows down over time, unfortunately. However, the repetition helps. And, it can be a bit annoying or slow, but Duolingo, one thing it does well, is it gives you the reps with important vocab and kanji. Duolingo is also a great way to get into kind of a daily practice habit and set a good kind of mindset. It's going to bombard you with notifications to ensure that, but I think spending a little bit of time every day is super important. If you skip a couple days, learning a language is difficult. So try not to skip days. And I think Duolingo by itself, if you're trying to learn Japanese and you're using all right, just Duolingo, I don't think so. I would caution against that. But I think combined with some other resources, it's a good tool. Another recommendation I have, or something that I use, is Bunpo. This is around, I'll do one lesson a day, 5 to 10 minutes or so. And I use Bunpo for grammar points. It's a very good way to get daily grammar practice in. You can learn grammar in little bite-sized chunks. And the questions it asks can be quite challenging. So I really have to think about, answering the problems. Duolingo, it can be a little easier. Once you've seen the problem already, you can kind of figure it out and whatnot. But Bunpo problems are difficult, and they're more realistic in terms of if you're preparing for like JLPT. I think Bunpo is great. I do want to note that I did pay for Bunpo. I paid for a lifetime subscription. I think it was $35, something like that. But I think $35 for it unlocked all like units from N5 to N1, like all grammar points, and $35 for that, and having no ads and whatnot. I think it's very well worth it, at least for me. Obviously, it's an investment. And just to clarify, I'm doing Duolingo with the free version, so I do have ads, unfortunately. But if you don't want ads on Duolingo, then you can also get the paid version for that as well. Number 3, the third thing that I use probably on the daily is this thing. It's on the iOS store. It's just called Kanji. It's the Kanji app. And basically this one I use for writing, right? Just to kind of grind kanji, as the app's name would suggest. But it has, it basically asks you to draw the kanji on the screen in the correct stroke order. And so I think that's really important. Just for get that muscle memory in when you're learning the kanji. So I've been using that app for writing and kind of kanji purposes. I really recommend it. I do a couple sections of that per day. The final kind of tool that I like to use when I to study Japanese is this website called kanjiquizzer.com. Kanji Kanji Quizzer, 2z's.com. And this kind of it splits up a lot of the kanji in from N5 to N1. Also has hiragana and katakana, so the two other alphabets, but it splits those kanji up, and you can practice them with, it's a flashcard system. So if I'm on the N2s now, so I'll click on one of the N2s. I'll have about 50 or so kanji, and the way you can adjust it to where you can have the flashcard have the English side, and then you have to pick out from which kanji corresponds to this, or you can have, what I do is I have the kanji pop up, and then it gives you 9 options of the reading of it. So, is this kanji like atsukao, or is this kanji sora, or something like that. You can also do it by looking at the kanji, and you have 9 choices, and what is the meaning? Is this to save? Is this to sell? Or whatnot. But I really like doing that, and if I get it wrong, I'll usually write down the kanji. And the reason I like this website is because when you flip over the card, it'll have a couple examples of the kanji in use in other vocab words, or like how does the kanji get combined with others. So I think that's very useful for that. All right, well, this has been a long segment, but I hope that this has proved useful. Any incoming jets or jets who are already here, find this useful, and if you're just listening to tune in, you find this interesting. But yeah, four tips just to go over is, number 1, get involved. I think, like I said, best way to have the best experience on jet. Number 2 is prepare games. This is more kind of like to ease your mind, make sure that if you're at the school, this helps you in your job a lot. I say having the games prepared. Number 3, avoiding the city hall. I feel like this one, if you have a good relationship with your city hall, you don't have to really follow this one. But if you're like, man, this feels so rigid and strict, kind of like what I'm feeling, then as soon as your morning meeting is done or whatever, even if you don't have class at the school yet, just go to your school. That's what I do. Once the morning meeting's done, I take the city hall car, blast over to the school, and even if I don't have a class yet, only till like 3rd period, I'll just keep myself occupied, do a little bit of studying before then. But I'll be doing the studying at the school and not at the city hall. I think that just makes the most sense to me. And finally, learn the language. I think this is great, or very important. You're living in Japan, try to speak Japanese. And I think learning the language just kind of helps in every possible way. It helps with, just your work in terms of being able to communicate better. It also helps in terms of getting involved, and just kind of, overall enhances your experience. So, anyway, with that being said, let's cut to the outro. All right, welcome back. I think this is looking to turn into possibly one of the longer episodes I've published. But let's close with our word and stat of the week. The word being aori. Aori. And this means kind of like influence or instigating. Recently, I was told that I was out with some friends, and someone told me I had good aori. And I was like, well, what is that? It turns out to be good influence, or kind of instigating, a little chippy. And I wasn't sure is that a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's a positive thing rather than a negative, hopefully. I know maybe someone, a native Japanese person listening to this is going to be like, hey, yo, you just got you just got roasted. But yeah, that's your word for the week, aori, influence or instigating. Now, your stat of the week is 11,600 yen. which is $77.33, or alternatively 5,800 yen, which comes out to about $38.66. Might be even lower now, because I think the yen has continued sliding and has gotten even weaker than it used to be. But these are the prices. So 11,600 yen for two people and 5,800 yen for one person. But these are the prices for a handmade sushi dinner in Kagoshima, which, like, this is a kind of like a fancy, sushi restaurant where the chef is really, hand making the sushi rolls in front of you, cutting like good quality fish, and you're paying $38 for that. And for such an experience, it's great. This was when Liam and I think our last evening, we went out and we had a nice sushi dinner, and we were a little worried, like, because you go in and, like I mentioned in one of the other episodes, one thing you can do at sushi places is order omakase, which means just kind of chef's choice, and he just kind of wows out, and picks what he thinks you'll like. But there's no like price tag on it. You just order it. You don't know how much it costs. So we were like, oh my gosh, is this gonna be like really expensive? And relatively, like, for me, I get paid in yen. I can't do this every evening. And even if you're in America, I mean, I'm spending $40 a night. That's a lot of money. But once in a while, going out to a nice dinner, $40, I think it's a great price to have to get freaking handmade sushi. I was very surprised by that. One thing I wanted to say about this is we even ended up getting a bottle of Mao, which is a very expensive piece of shochu. And I don't know why the sushi chef just kind of gave it to us. I think maybe, I don't know if we had like good manners, or we just had to behave well, or he had a good time talking to us a little bit. But I mean, wow, we were very surprised that we ended up getting a nice bottle of shochu for free. So shout out to I think it was called Sakoma Sushi in Kagoshima. Great people. Thank you all so much for listening to today's episode, Jet Advice Part 2. My sincere apologies for the I have 1 week delay written over here, but on my notes, but that was because I wanted to get this out last week. Sorry for the 2-week delay. We'll be back on track after this, or I'll be back on track after this. Episodes will be coming out as scheduled. So yeah, I will see you in 2 weeks. Per Aspera Ad Astra.